If you click this, then you are just like me, always wondering which god would win in an actual fight. And I don't mean physically, I mean who would win in a deeper sense, like who carries more weight, whose thunder means something more, whose storm always matters when you strip away the mythology and ask the real question underneath all of it. And what does it say about us, the humans, the people who created these gods? Did we need them in the first place? Because here's two things. Two completely separate civilizations, thousands of miles apart, with no contact or shared language or shared sea, looked up at the same sky, both heard the same crack of thunder, split the heavens open, both felt that primal chest-collapsing terror that lightning brings when it's close enough to feel, and both of them, the Yoruba people of the West Africa and the Norse people of Scandinavia, decided independently that something alive was behind it. Not an accident, not weather, something with a will. That's not a coincidence I can just move past. I mean, that stops me every time I think about it. Because what that tells me is that thunder, the raw, uncontrollable, magnificent violence of a storm, does something to the human psychic that transcends geography, culture, and time. It demands a face, it demands a story, and ultimately, it demands a god. So today, we're going to sit inside two of the most powerful thunder mythologies ever constructed by human imagination. We're going to walk through Shango of the Yoruba, the king who became god, yes, the man who turned into divinity, and Thor of the Norse, the son of Odin, the hammer wielder, the protector of Midgard. And we're going to take both of them seriously. We're going to take both of them apart, piece by piece. And by the end, I want us to do something unusual. I don't want us to declare a winner like you see in Marvel movies. I want us to understand what kind of power each god represents and what that reveals about the people who worship them. Let's start where all storms begin, with silence before the break. There is something about Shango that the mythology refuses to let you forget, and this is, he was human first, yes, just like me and you, flesh and blood. That's not a spot detail, that's everything, because most gods in most traditions arrive already divine. Take Zeus for example, he was born of Kronos. Kronos was a Titan, not a human, so you get the point. But Shango, well, Shango walked the earth. He ruled as the fourth Alafin, the king of the Oyo Empire, in what is now called modern-day Nigeria. He was flesh, he made choices, he made mistakes, and somehow through a story that still unsettles me, the more I think about it, he crossed from mortality to godhood. But let's not rush to the apotheosis. Let's start in the palace first. The Shango of oral tradition was not a gentle king. He was magnetic, ferocious, and magnificent in a way that only people who know they are running out of time can be. He loved music, especially the talking drum, the bata, which in Yoruba culture wasn't just entertainment, it was communication, sacred, almost a language of his own. He danced with Abaddon, he commanded armies, he had multiple wives, Oya, Oshun, and Oba, three of the most powerful female orishas in the Yoruba pantheon. Even his domestic life was mythologically dense. But Shango was also volatile, prone to rage, and this is where the mythology gets psychologically interesting. Because the Yoruba didn't sanitize him, they didn't make him noble in a clean, uncomplicated way. They let him be difficult, they let him be human. There is a story, and since oral traditions vary, I'd like to acknowledge that up front. In this story, Shango, while experimenting with the sacred power of Ogun's medicine, accidentally called down lightning on his own palace. His wives, his children, his servants, all killed in fire he summoned. The story differs on other details. Some say it was a test of power gone wrong. Some say it was an enemy who tricked him. But the emotional truth of the story is consistent across the variation. Shango was devastated. Now think about that. He was a man, king or warrior, who was broken by his own power. There's something in that image that feels painfully modern. How many people in history, how many people right now have had to reckon with the consequences of their own strength, with the damage done not by their weaknesses but by their force, their strength? Shango's tragedy wasn't that he was powerless, it was that he was too powerful and didn't yet understand what power asks of you in return. After this, the account describes him wandering, living in palace. Some traditions say he retreated into the forest, others say he was exiled by his own cult, by political rivals who had grown tired of his temperament. And then, this is where the myth shifts into something else entirely. He disappeared. Some say he hanged himself from a tree in the forest, consumed by shame. Others say he ascended, just, rose, like Jesus Christ did. that the earth refused to hold him, that thunder answered him, and he became the storm he had once accidentally called down. His followers would cry out, Obakosu, the king did not hang, insisting that what looked like death was actually transformation. Now, I find myself sitting with that contradiction for a very long time because both things might be true simultaneously. The shame is real, yes. The transformation also is real. Maybe mythology is trying to tell us something, that you cannot become what you are meant to be without first hitting the lowest point imaginable. Maybe Shango's death was his ascension, not in the spite of his fall, but because of it. The man who destroyed his home with lightning, who wandered in grief, who was brought to his knees by the consequences of his own power, that man became the god of thunder. Not the untouched, not the perfect, the broken one who got back up. And now, as an Orisha, as a divine force in the Yoruba and diaspora traditions, Shango is something I think Western mythology rarely produces. He is a god of justice and passion simultaneously at the same time. He doesn't separate them. His thunderbolts are not random. They are directed. They fall on liars, on oath breakers, on those who abuse power, which, given that Shango himself once abused power, carries a kind of particular poetic weight. He became the punisher of the very sin he once committed. His colors are red and white. His symbols is the double-headed axe, the usher, representing balance, but a balance that is always in motion, always threatening to tip. His sacred animal is the ram. His sacred number in many tradition is 6. And across the Atlantic, carried in the hearts of enslaved Yoruba people who were stolen from their homeland and forced into a brutal new world, Shango survived. He didn't just survive, he thrived. In Cuba, he became Chango, with a C. In Brazil, Shango. In Trinidad, in Haiti, in New Orleans, the thunder god who began in West Africa crossed an ocean of unspeakable suffering and arrived on the other side, still roaring. That's not mythology, that's history, and it moves me every time I say it out loud. There's a kind of power in Shango that goes beyond the supernatural. It's the power of cultural memory, refusing to die, of a people maintaining a spiritual identity, even when every external condition was designed to destroy it. Shango endured not because he was worshipped in temples made of stones, but because he lived in memories, in songs, in ceremonies, in bodies of people who danced his rhythm in secret when the world wasn't looking. If power was measured by survival, by the ability to travel across centuries and continents and still mean something, then Shango's resume is extraordinary. Now let's go to the north. Let's go cold. Imagine the Scandinavian winter, not the romantic kind, the real kind. Weeks without sunlight, storms that could bury a village, a cold so deep and committed that it feels personal, like the earth itself has decided to turn against you. Now imagine the people who lived in that, who built lives in that, who, despite everything, stayed. These were the Norse, present-day Norwegians. The Norse didn't create gentle gods. How could they? Their words didn't offer gentleness as a model. Thor, sorry, I'm not Norwegian. In Old Norse, is the son of Odin, the All-Father, and Jord. Again, I'm not Norwegian, so you have to forgive me for these Norwegian names. The personification of Earth. So from the very beginning, there was something interesting embedded in his DNA. His father is intellect, wisdom, war, and death. His mother is the earth itself. Thor is in a sense the union of mind and matter, of the heavens and the ground, which explains maybe why he became the protector of Midgard, the realms of human beings, and not Asgard, the realms of the gods. Not the higher cosmic planes, here, the middle world, the muddy, struggling, mortal world. That choice of domain matters enormously to me. Why? Because Odin is a god for kings and warriors and poets, for the elites of Norse society. Thor is for the farmers, sailors, craftsmen, the people who worked with their hands and needed the rain to come and the frost to stay away and the crops to grow. When you understand that, Thor's mythology takes on a different character. He's not just powerful, he's necessary. His thunder is terrifying, yes, but it's also the thunder that precedes summer storms, the storm that waters the field, the power that enables life. There's a beautiful tension in that. The very force that can kill you is also the force that feeds you. Thor's weapon is Mjolnir, arguably the most famous divine weapon in all of Western mythology. I mean, if you've seen Marvel, you know that's true. which I think says something fascinating about what Northern Europeans valued in a god. It's a hammer, not a sword, not a bow, not a lance or a spectre, a hammer, the tool of a craftsman, the instrument of building and destruction. You can kill with a hammer, yes, but you can also create entire civilizations. You can build ships, drive nails, shape metals. There is a democracy to the hammer that a sword doesn't have. And I wonder if that was intentional. I wonder if the Norse people who told these stories knew on some level that they were saying something about what power is actually for. Now, Thor himself, who is he, really? When you get past the Marvel version, when you set aside the blonde hair and the dramatic English accent and the superhero landing, whoosh, he is enormous, red-bearded in the original sources, not blonde, enormously strong, the strongest of all the S gods. He is not subtle, not a schemer. Where Odin plays chairs with the fate of the world, Thor plays dice. He acts, he reacts. He is, and I mean this as a genuine observation, not a criticism, emotionally transparent in a way that most gods are not. When he's angry, you know. When he's joyous, you know. He drinks with giants, disguises himself as a bride. Genuinely one of the most funny episodes in mythology. He goes on fishing trips with the world serpent. Can you imagine that? Which is either the most dangerous or most psychologically revealing hobby any deity has ever had. Because the world serpent, Jormungand, is Thor's destined destroyer. In Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse, like Armageddon, the Christian apocalypse, they are fated to kill each other. Thor slays the serpent and then walks 9 steps before dying from its venom. That's it. That's his ending. He knows it. The Norse knows it, and yet he keeps going out to sea, keeps trying to catch the serpent, keeps confronting the very thing that will eventually end him. I have to stop there because that's not the behavior of a god without depth. That's the behavior of someone who has looked mortality in the face, or in this case, apocalypse, and decided to engage with it anyway, to keep fishing, to keep confronting the unconquerable. What does that say about the Norse people who told that story? That they believed in a god who was brave but not invincible, or a god who was destined to die but kept showing up? I think it says that they understood something profound about courage, that true courage isn't the absence of fear or guarantee of victory. It's the willingness to go back to the water even when you know what lives in the deep. That's literally deep. Thor fights constantly. Giants, not Norse, are his primary adversaries, and the Norse mythology presents this as almost cosmically necessary. These giants represent chaos, the encroachment of disorder and the structured world. Every time Thor defeats a giant, he's not just winning a battle, he's maintaining the conditions under which life is possible. Order against entropy, structure against dissolution. It's exhausting work, yes, but it never ends, and Thor does it without asking for existential credit, which is either admirable or slightly sad, and I genuinely can't decide which. He has a belt, Mjolnir, that doubles his already godlike strength. Iron glows, Zhang require to grip Mjolnir, the hammer itself, which always returns when thrown, which is the kind of detail that a child finds cool and scholars find mythologically loaded. The idea that divine power properly directed always comes back at you. That righteousness is clinical, not expendable. And then there is this. In Ragnarok, after everything falls, after Asgard burns and Odin dies in Farin's jaws, and the world sinks into the sea, the sons of Thor survive. They inherit Mjolnir. They carry the hammer into the next world, the reborn world that rises from the waters. The Thunder God doesn't just die. His legacy survives the apocalypse. That's not a small mythological statement. That's an entire physiology of history encoded in a story. Let me stop the comparison for a moment and ask something I think is more important than who wins. Why do Buddhist cultures, so deeply different from each other, agree that the most powerful god, or the most powerful, should be the god of thunder specifically? I mean, even in Greek mythology, Zeus is strongest and he is a god of thunder too. So why? Why not the god of the sun, or the sea, or the earth? Why thunder? And I think the answer is about unpredictability. The sun rises and sets on schedule. The sea, while dangerous, has patterns that sailors can learn. But thunder, well, thunder comes without perfect warning. It strikes seemingly at random. It's loud enough to silence everything else. It's bright enough to turn night into noon. for a fraction of a second, and then it leaves everything gone, leaves you in the dark with your ears ringing, wondering if you're still alive. That combination, supreme power plus radical unpredictability, is exactly what human beings have always associated with the divine. Because the divine, well, whatever it is, whatever it means in different traditions, have never reliably arrived on schedule. Grace is sudden, disaster is sudden, revelation is sudden, love sometimes is sudden too. That change, the thing that changes most of us, rarely gives us warning. So both Shango and Thor are, in a sense, gods of transformation, not the gentle, gradual kind, the lightning kind, the kind that changes everything in a single moment and leaves you either shattered or remade. Now let me do something that might make some people uncomfortable. Let me actually compare their power directly, not as entertainment, but as mythology. Because the two traditions emphasizes different kinds of power, and that difference is, well, I think, the most revealing thing about this entire comparison. Shango's power is personal. It is rooted in lived experience. He became a god through human tragedy, through mistake, grief, shame, and transformation. His thunderbolts carry moral weight in a specific way and documented way. They are not just expressions of force, they are judgments. When Shango strikes, the mythology suggests that someone has done something to deserve it. He is the god of justice who uses his power to respond to human behavior that makes him relational in a way that Thor simply isn't. What does that say about Yoruba civilization? I think it says that the people who created Shango understood power as something that must be accountable. That force without moral grounding is not divine, it's chaos. Even their god of thunder, who is himself imperfect, who himself caused terrible damage, is understood to wield his power with purpose, with memory, with consequences. And Thor's power, well, Thor's power is structural. It is the force that maintains the boundary between order and chaos, between the habitable world and the encroaching void. Thor doesn't strike because a person has sinned. He strikes because something must strike, or else everything else collapses. His power is less about judgment and more about maintenance, keeping the conditions alive under which human life can continue. What does that say about Norse civilization? They lived in a world where chaos was so close, so constant, so geographically real, in the form of winter, ocean, famine, that their gods of power cannot afford to be moralist. He needed to be a guardian. He needed to be out there fighting all the time, not weighing sins or holding the line. Both are sophisticated, both are necessary, and they reflect two completely different answers to the same question. What is power for? Here is where I want to get genuinely uncertain for a moment, because I've been building towards a comparison, and the more I build it, the more I realize that both mythologies, despite being astonishingly rich, leave certain questions deliberately unanswered. Shango's mythology never fully explains what it means for a human being to become a god. The transformation happens, it is celebrated, it is narrated, but the interior of that experience, the phenomenology of what Shango felt as he crossed from mortality to divinity, is not given to us. And I think that might be intentional, because in Yoruba tradition, the Orishas are not entirely separate from humanity. They are forces, yes, but they are also relatives, ancestors who became modern ancestors, and the mystery of that crossing is protected. Perhaps because it must remain mysterious. The gap between human and divine must not be too easily explained, or the sacred collapses into the ordinary. Thor's mythology has its own unanswered mysteries, and this is the one that haunts me the most. Why does Ragnarok have to happen? Like, why does the world have to end? All he knows, he's seen it. The Norse has spoken it, and yet no one tries to stop it. There is no heroic choice that averts the apocalypse. It comes, and I read various scholarly interpretations of this that reflects the Norse acceptance of the fate, that it reflects a clinical view of time, that it is a kind of cosmic reset. But none of these explanations fully satisfy me, because the Norse built such vivid populated mythology, created gods they clearly loved and feared, built entire cosmological architecture, and then said, all this ends in Ragnarok, and that's okay. Is that okay? Well, for me, that's not okay. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Ragnarok isn't a statement that endings are acceptable. Maybe it's a statement that they are inevitable, and that what matters is not whether you survived, but whether you showed up, whether you carried the hammer, and whether you kept fishing. Now, I promised at the beginning that I would answer the question, and I'm going to keep that promise. But I want to be honest about what I think the answer actually is. because I don't think it's the answer the question seems to be asking for. In terms of raw cosmological power within their own mythological system, Thor is fighting on a larger scale. He contends with the world serpents. He battles with the forces that could literally unmake reality itself. His power is so great, he requires enchanted gloves just to hold his own weapon, Mjolnir. His death takes 9 steps and an apocalypse. If they were purely about scale, purely about grandeur of the catastrophe being prevented, then Thor operates in an almost incomprehensible register. But here's what I keep coming back to. Shango survived beyond his mythology, not just in the sense that Yoruba religion continues to be practiced today, which it does vibrantly with millions of adherents across West Africa and the African diaspora, but in the sense that Shango crossed one of the most brutal ruptures in human history, the Atlantic slave trade, and arrived on the other side still recognized, still himself, still the god of thunder. There is no Viking diaspora in quite the same sense. Norse mythology, as beautiful and powerful as it is, largely entered the modern world through text, the Eddas, the sagas, preserved by scholars, rediscovered by romantic, appropriated, sometimes troubling by various nationalistic movements, and eventually given a cape and a hammer by Marvel Studio. Thor is famous, Thor is beloved, but Thor is, in some meaningful sense, historical. Shango is alive in a different way. In the Candomblé ceremony in Salvador, Brazil, in the Santeria ritual in Havana, in the Shango tradition of Trinidad, he is worshipped actively, not just studied academically. He still receives offering. He still, in the belief of millions of people, still responds. I do not say this to argue that Shango is real and Thor isn't, or to educate between belief systems. That's not my place, and that's not the point of this exploration. I say this because it reveals something extraordinary about the nature of divine power that mythology itself keeps pointing to us. The most powerful god is not the one who controls the most cosmic territory. It's the one who cannot be destroyed. And Shango carries in the memories of enslaved people, hidden in Catholic saint names to survive colonial suppression, encoded in drum rhythms and dances and colors and offerings that could not be destroyed. He was tired. Every mechanism of colonial erasure was deployed against the Yoruba spiritual tradition, and Shango looked at all of it and kept thundering. Oba Koso, the king did not hang. So who is the true god of thunder? Maybe the question isn't really about power at all. Maybe it never was. Maybe when we look at both Shango and Thor, when we sit with their stories long enough to feel what they were actually saying, we find the same uncomfortable truth underneath both, that human beings have always needed their storms to have a face, that the randomness of lightnings is too frightening to tolerate without a name behind it, that we invented gods not to explain the physics of mythology, but to answer a much deeper question, much more frightening question. Is there something in chaos that knows us? Shango says yes, and it is watching whether you keep your oaths, whether you abuse your power, whether you are willing to be broken and remade. Thor says yes, and it is tired, and it is fighting, and it is going to lose eventually, but he hasn't stopped yet. Both answers are somehow the one I needed to hear, because maybe the god of thunder isn't up there, somewhere in the realm beyond our reach. Maybe the god of thunder is the part of us that sees the storm coming, that feels the pressure build and the air change, and the hair on our arms stand up, and instead of running, instead of hiding, takes one step forward and listens. If this moved you, made you rethink differently, or made you want to go deeper, the mythology is still up there. It always has been. The thunder doesn't stop because you stop listening. I'll see you in the next video.